In the year 1823, in a small, windswept village in northern Vermont, something happened that people would whisper about for generations, a choice made in the quiet snow that would shadow lives beyond imagination. The first snow had fallen early that year, coating the wooden cabins and narrow paths in silence. Yet one decision, seemingly small, would ripple through the village like an unseen wind, carrying fear and regret. No one knew exactly what had prompted the act, only that it had been sudden, shrouded in frost and fog, a moment when conscience wavered beneath the weight of desire, cold, and human frailty. Some say the snow itself held its breath that night, as if the trees and hills waited to see which path a man's heart would follow, a path that could not be undone. The village lay tucked between frozen hills, smoke curling from chimneys, the air sharp with the scent of pine and wood smoke, every step in the snow crunching softly, echoing through empty streets with a lonely rhythm. Morning light filtered weakly through gray clouds, glinting off icy roofs and frost-covered fields, turning the woods into a silver maze where shadows seemed to linger longer than they ought, whispering secrets of the past. At the village's edge stood a small, weathered cabin, its boards creaking under the weight of frost, windows dim with condensation, and inside, a hearth glowed faintly, struggling to hold warmth against the winter wind. Jonathan Hale, tall and wiry, with weathered hands and a somber face lined by years of toil, tended the cabin with quiet diligence, his eyes sharp, yet weary, carrying a restless unease that no fire could banish. He was known among villagers as reliable, a man of few words, always first to rise and last to sleep. Yet there was a tension in his steps, a hesitancy that drew curious glances from those passing by. His wife, Martha, gentle and steadfast, moved through the cabin with quiet grace, her hands skilled at patching clothes and mending small wounds, her voice soft but firm, always tempering Jonathan's impulsive tendencies with reason. The children played outside briefly, their laughter cutting through the winter stillness, small boots leaving trails in the snow, unaware of the weight of choices soon to unfold, innocent in a world shaped by grown-up fears and desires. Villagers whispered of old superstitions that winter, of spirits lurking where snow fell thickest, of omens carried on wind and frost, and Jonathan, though practical, could not ignore the uneasy tension in the air. Even the livestock seemed restless, stamping hooves against icy ground, eyes wide, sensing the coming cold that held more than frost, as if the land itself trembled at decisions waiting to be made. By night, the forest loomed dark and vast beyond the village, skeletal trees scratching at the sky, hiding secrets beneath snow, and Jonathan often gazed toward it, wondering if courage and fear might meet there in silent judgment. Jonathan paced by the window, watching the snow thicken, each flake seeming to press on his chest, reminding him of the decision he had delayed, a choice twisting quietly in the corners of his mind. He had been offered work from the town merchant, a task that promised coin beyond his needs, yet it demanded secrecy and a moral compromise Jonathan feared to name aloud. "What if it's wrong, Martha?" he whispered one evening, voice tight, carrying through the cabin, while she looked up from her weaving, her hands steady, eyes patient, though worry lingered beneath her calm. "You must decide, Jonathan. No one else can carry it for you," she replied softly, her words careful, yet carrying the weight of centuries-old wisdom that choices define men more than deeds. The villagers spoke of honesty, of virtue, of reputations carved through generations, but Jonathan felt a pull toward the promise, the heat of greed mingling with desperation, warming him like fire against the frost. Late at night, shadows seemed to crawl along the cabin walls, stretching and twisting like unseen hands, and Jonathan could not tell if the chill was in the room or in his conscience. A knock came one evening, light but deliberate, stirring the hearth's flames into quick dancing shadows, and Jonathan froze, knowing it could be the merchant, or worse, fate demanding immediate response. He opened the door slowly, snow spilling over his boots, and a stranger's eyes met his, eyes bright and calculating, and Jonathan felt the weight of choice press upon him more sharply than ever. "Can I trust you, sir?" the visitor asked, voice low, carrying authority without arrogance, hinting that Jonathan's decision would ripple far beyond his cabin, far beyond the winter night. Jonathan hesitated, knowing silence might protect him, yet action might grant him wealth or ruin, and the snow fell heavier, muffling sound, as if the world paused for his answer. Martha's hand rested on his shoulder, warm and firm, a gentle anchor, yet Jonathan felt that her presence could not prevent what might come if he strayed from the line he knew he ought not cross. In the days that followed, he walked the village paths with unease, seeing faces bright in morning frost. Yet every smile seemed to weigh with expectation, every glance a reminder that his secret would not remain buried forever. Rumors began to stir, minor whispers among merchants and farmers, a sense that someone knew more than they admitted, and Jonathan's mind spun with doubt, fear, and the thrill of temptation's promise. He debated the consequences with himself endlessly, pacing frozen fields, imagining outcomes, each more frightening than the last, yet unable to relinquish the lure of immediate reward, of the simple solution that seemed ever just out of reach. The wind carried faint voices from the forest, perhaps animals, perhaps something older, warning him in ways he could not fully comprehend, stirring visions of failure that lingered at the edge of sleep. A storm approached, clouds heavy with snow and possibility, and Jonathan felt the pressure tighten, the decision no longer theoretical, but urgent, demanding action before the first flake of dawn dissolved his resolve. "Jonathan, you must not wait," Martha warned one morning, her voice firm yet trembling slightly, eyes wide with the knowledge that human hesitation can invite calamity, that snow does not forgive indecision. He clenched his fists, imagining the merchant's offer, the gold, the ease it would bring, but also the shadow it would cast over his soul, a burden heavier than any snow-laden roof. By nightfall, he found himself alone in the forest path, snow crunching beneath his boots, heart racing, breath clouding the air, every step a drumbeat of consequence as the choice approached its irreversible moment. And in the stillness between wind and snow, Jonathan realized that indecision had already begun to shape events, that moral hesitation can act as much as sin in the unfolding of destiny. The next morning, Jonathan emerged with a resolve heavy as the snow, steps deliberate, each crunch underfoot echoing like a warning through the frozen village, while frost clung stubbornly to every roof and fence. He approached the merchant's shop, the scent of pine and smoked meat wafting through the door, and the merchant's eyes gleamed, reading Jonathan's hesitation, knowing instinctively that greed and fear had met in that cabin. "Are you certain, Jonathan?" the merchant asked, voice low, carrying warmth and threat together, a mix that made the choice more difficult than the snow-laden path outside. Jonathan nodded, swallowing unease, the cold pressing against his skin, as if the winter itself disapproved, and he felt a chill creep past his hearth-bound courage straight into his bones. By afternoon, whispers floated along the village streets, neighbors watching Jonathan pass with strange intent, observing his every gesture as though the snow itself carried their judgment silently across icy rooftops. The children noticed a change, laughter fading from the yard, eyes wide with unspoken questions, while Martha's gaze lingered on him, a mix of sorrow and hope, silently beseeching him to remember who he had been. Snow piled high in drifts along the forest edge, and Jonathan found himself wandering there, seeking clarity, but the woods offered only whispers and shadows, suggesting paths of danger and consequences not yet imagined. Animals stirred nervously in the trees, foxes pausing mid-step, crows watching with bright eyes, and Jonathan could not tell if nature observed him with curiosity or judgment, each step fraught with tension. At night, he dreamt of the merchant's coins melting into ice, of Martha's eyes clouded with disappointment, and of the snow covering secrets too heavy for a man to carry alone, and he woke with a start, heart pounding. The villagers spoke in hushed tones at the market, mentioning Jonathan's name alongside words of caution and rumor, yet none dared confront him directly, the weight of his choice casting a shadow over the small community. One evening, a violent wind swept through the village, rattling shutters and bending trees, and Jonathan felt it like an accusation, pressing through the cracks of his cabin, forcing him to reckon with decisions made in haste. He returned to the cabin, boots wet and frozen, only to find Martha waiting silently, the firelight flickering across her face, reflecting both fear and unwavering resolve, as though she could see the ripple of consequence he could not. "The snow grows heavier, Jonathan," she said softly, voice carrying weight. "And so do the choices we bury beneath it. They have a way of surfacing, no matter how deep we hope to hide them." That night, Jonathan heard faint footsteps outside, crunching through the freshly fallen snow, shadows moving past the window, too deliberate to be animals, and a prickle of dread crept across his neck and shoulders. In the forest beyond the village, a faint light flickered among trees, strange and unnatural, and Jonathan, drawn by both fear and curiosity, realized that actions have consequences that reach beyond man and hearth, into realms silent yet aware. Snow fell without pause, blanketing tracks, hiding paths, and Jonathan struggled to navigate, the weight of guilt pressing heavier than the drifts, as if each flake carried judgment from ancestors he had never met. A neighbor's horse vanished mysteriously from the barn, rumors spreading like wildfire, eyes turning toward Jonathan with suspicion, whispers blending with the wind, and he felt the first real taste of fear mingled with regret. The merchant's calls became urgent, messages arriving under the snow and through whispering villagers, reminding Jonathan that once a choice is made, the world shifts, and there is no return to previous innocence. Martha pleaded for him to stop, to reconsider, but Jonathan, trapped between desire and conscience, realized that he had entered a threshold from which retreat was uncertain, and the snow outside seemed to grow more oppressive. By dawn, the village lay in frozen silence, smoke rising from chimneys, tracks disappearing under drifts, and Jonathan understood that his decision had begun to carve a story of shadows, one that could no longer be ignored or undone. The storm reached its fury, wind lashing snow against Jonathan's cabin, and he realized the choice he made had broken more than trust. It had fractured the quiet certainty of his life forever. Footsteps crunched outside, deliberate and unrelenting, and Jonathan's breath caught, heart hammering against ribs, as if the snow itself carried the judgment of every villager, every neighbor, and every moral law he had bent. He opened the door to see the merchant's figure, shadowed and imposing, but the gold he had sought gleamed less brightly than the cold dread in his own chest, a weight he could not ignore. "The coin is yours, Jonathan," the merchant said, voice smooth, "but I wonder if you can bear its cost, for the frost that falls is heavier than it seems." A scream pierced the wind, faint but sharp, cutting through the storm like a blade, and Jonathan turned, eyes widening, as the children's voices echoed across the snow, muffled and frightened, reaching into his guilt-stricken heart. The forest, dark and dense beyond the village, seemed alive, trees groaning under weight of snow and judgment, shadows twisting toward him, suggesting consequences no man could forestall, paths lost beneath drift and fear. Jonathan ran toward the sound, boots slipping, arms heavy with cold, chest heaving, knowing that wealth or survival mattered little if those he loved were endangered, that the moral cost had become painfully clear. Martha's figure emerged, pale against the storm, calling the children, voice rising above wind, and Jonathan felt the fragile line between disaster and salvation narrow to a single step, every choice a knife edge. He reached the path where footprints disappeared under snow. The children huddled near a fallen tree, eyes wide, frozen fear in their small faces, and he realized that hesitation had nearly stolen what could never be bought back. The merchant appeared again, silent, watching, and Jonathan felt a fury mixed with relief, understanding that greed had nearly destroyed all that mattered, and the snow, relentless and pure, seemed to cleanse the moment with silent judgment. "You chose poorly, Jonathan," the merchant finally said, tone flat. "But it is not too late to redeem what you can, though the frost remembers all that men try to hide." Jonathan gathered the children, holding them close, heart pounding, knowing that love and conscience mattered more than gold, and every step back toward the village through snow became a passage of quiet penance. The wind died slowly, as if relieved, snow settling gently over footprints and mistakes, and Jonathan saw the first glimmer of sun through clouds, reflecting in icy rooftops, hinting at forgiveness earned, not given freely. By nightfall, the village lay peaceful once more, yet Jonathan knew the memory of his choice would linger, that the quiet frost had recorded his failings and lessons alike, an unspoken witness to human frailty. And as he sat by the hearth, Martha's hand in his, children asleep, he understood that morality is tested not in easy moments, but in the cold, isolated hours when choices press like winter against the soul. The snow melted slowly over the village, revealing paths once hidden, footprints frozen and then softened by time, a quiet reminder that every choice leaves its mark, though not all are visible at first glance. Jonathan worked the fields with renewed care, eyes watchful, mind quieter, understanding that actions, once taken, ripple farther than men imagine, touching lives like shadows stretching over frozen earth before dawn. Martha moved beside him, her hands steady, her presence a gentle anchor, and together they rebuilt trust and warmth. Small victories etched quietly into everyday chores, small mercies glinting in the sunlit frost. The villagers noticed a change, subtle but profound, in Jonathan's gait and gaze, a man reminded of humility, of responsibility, of the fragile balance between desire and duty, and they whispered, approving yet wary. Even the forest seemed less menacing, winds softening through skeletal branches, animals returning cautiously, and the snow, once oppressive, lay as a blanket of lessons, carrying the echoes of choices without judgment or scorn. Jonathan often paused by the window at dusk, watching the last light fade behind distant hills, thinking of the night when greed and fear collided, and knowing that conscience, though fragile, endures beyond gold or fleeting advantage. He spoke little of that winter's choice, yet its memory lived in every careful step, every measured word, a quiet cautionary tale for those who watched him, and for those who would face temptation in silence. Sometimes, when snow drifted heavily in January, villagers claimed they saw a lone figure in the woods, careful and deliberate, moving among shadows and frost, as if to remind themselves that wisdom often arrives only after error. Jonathan never forgot the cost, nor the mercy he received, and in time, the story passed into whispers, not loud nor harsh, but persistent, carried on wind, frost, and memory alike, shaping generations quietly and deeply. And in that valley, people learned that some mistakes don't echo loudly, they whisper for generations.